Quadratics, page 3, problem 2H. Solve exactly by completing the square. Completing the square we do by trying to make a perfect square on the left, and then we leave everything else on the right. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to put everything on the left. Let's see, H2H. So we're doing x squared plus 10x, 10 equals 8x. So we're going to put everything on the left, which means we're going to subtract 8x from both sides. We're going to get x squared minus 8x plus 10. And then you can see that the right side just goes to 0 because you have 8x minus 8x. And you're saying, why did you leave that space there? You're going to see why. What we want to be left with here is we want to make a binomial squared that's like x minus something squared equals, and then maybe we're going to have something, we're going to have 0, I'm sorry, we're going to have something on the right that's not 0. Okay, so we're going to have something here. Okay, and so to get there, we need to have a very special value here so that this turns into a perfect square. Not too many polynomials turn into perfect squares. So, but we kind of know how this behaves. So we know that if we put a certain value here, which happens to be, if we take half of this value here and we square it, then that will be a value which makes the whole thing turn into a perfect square down here. So now the first few times you do this, it's going to be kind of hard, but basically you take the negative 8, you divide it by 2, you get negative 4. And then you square it, and you get 16, positive 16. So we're going to put plus 16 here, okay, because we're going to need that so that we can do the perfect square. I'm just going to rewrite it because I wrote it kind of messy. Plus 16. Okay, and not only are we going to add 16 here, we also have to subtract 16. And the reason why is because if you can't just add 16 and not add 16 to this side too, right? You have to add 16 to both sides. Or if you don't want to add 16 to both sides, what you can do is you can add 16 and then right afterwards subtract 16, and then you're not doing anything, right? You're adding it and subtracting it. That's the same thing as adding 0. Okay. So we just figured out that the magic number that we need to add there is plus 16, and we did. Now what we're going to do is we're going to group this part, and we're going to factor it. X minus, and we already know it's x minus 8, no, x minus 4 squared, sorry. We already know it's x minus 4 squared. Because when you have the negative 4 squared, it's the 16. And when you have negative 4 times x, it's negative 4x, and then you have 2 of them, so it's negative 8x, okay? All right, so this factors into these two. And we put the 16 in there so that it would factor perfectly into 2 squares, okay? And then we still have the negative 16 out here, and we still have the plus 10, and now we have equals 0, okay? I'm just going to erase it. So we're almost here, right? We're almost here. The only thing we need to do now is take these two things and move them to the right side. So add these two together, you get negative 6, right? So we'll add 6 to both sides, and that gets us to here. So what we wanted was, we wanted x minus 4 squared, and then we added 6 to both sides. Minus 6 plus 6 equals 0, so the left side doesn't have any more constant term. The right side, 0 plus 6 gives us 6. Right? And then now we're just going to square both sides, square root both sides. And remember, when you take the square root of 6, it could be a plus value or it could be a minus value. So now we're left with x minus 4 on the left, because the square root cancels the square. And then we got plus or minus square root of 6. And now we just add 4 to both sides. And it gives us the two solutions, which are 4 plus or minus the square root of 6. Okay? Now let's go down to 3C. Here we're just going to do the same thing. we're just going to put everything on the left first, and then try to figure out a perfect square. So we're going to try to get it in this form, x minus something equals something, and then we're going to be able to take the square root of both sides and solve it. So in some of the others you have equals 0 already there, and then you're all ready to start, but I chose one of the more complicated ones. So you got 3x squared equals 6x plus 4. First thing we want to do is move everything to the left side. So we subtract 6x from both sides. We subtract 4 from both sides. And then we get 3x squared minus 6x minus 4 equals 0. Now we're going to try to get it in this form. And this is a little, you can see this is different. It's got a 3 out front. And last time there was no 3. So actually in this case, we're not exactly going to get something like this. We're going to get maybe something with a factor out front like that. Okay, because we're not going to be able to get rid of the 3 so easy. Okay, so let's do this. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to work on these two. So we're going to say, okay, I want to make it look like it did before with just an x squared. Okay, because that's easier. So I'm going to factor out the 3. So I'm going to put 3x squared minus 2x, and I have minus 4 out here. Okay. And then what magic number do I need to add here? Well, take negative 2 divided by 2. You get negative 1. Square it, and you get positive 1. So if I add 1 here, that's going to be a perfect square. But I also need to subtract 1 because I can't just add 1 to this side and not do anything else. I need to immediately subtract it inside the parentheses. Otherwise, that's not legal mathematically. So now I'm going to take x squared minus 2x plus 1, and I'm going to factor that. And it's going to give me x squared minus 1. Oops, I'm sorry. X minus 1 squared. And that's times 3, right? But then I still have this negative 1 here. And it's not just a negative 1, it's a negative 1 times 3. So I'm going to put negative 3 minus 4 equals 0. And then so now we're almost there. We just need to move these two to the other side. So that's a negative 7, right? I'm going to add 7 to both sides. And then that'll give me 3x minus 1 squared. And this goes to 0. And that'll be 7. So now I have x minus 1 squared equals 7/3. I take the square root of both sides. And remember, when I take the square root of a number, it could be a positive or a negative value. And I'm left with x minus 1 equals plus or minus square root of 7/3. We can't really simplify that unless we just find a decimal equivalent that's pretty close. Add 1 to both sides. We get x equals 1 plus or minus square root of 7/3. Okay? And that's the answer to that one.